Nothing beats losing faith in humanity faster than those who ought to look out for you letting you down. The citizens of Chicago have got as much as a grain of sand's worth of faith in its leaders in the last few years. With corruption scandals, high cost of living, crime, poor health care, a grappling migrant crisis, and a host of other problems, this once prosperous city is in a deep mess hole. But how did the city of Chicago get here today? Join me as I delve into uncovering the mystery of how these troubles come about and how it is affecting the city and its citizens. The right way to spell Chicago probably should have been in dollar signs. Living in Chicago is expensive. It is right among the top 5% of the most expensive cities in the world. You'll need an average of $4,600 to be comfortable in a month and around $3,000 just for rent. Saying it out loud hurts. Various factors are responsible for the high cost of living. Let's see taxes. How does this aspect contribute to making everything else costly? Chicago is home to the second highest commercial property taxes in the nation at 3.78%. According to reports, in the past decade, total taxes billed have increased from $1.98 billion in the tax year 2011, payable in 2012, to $3.82 billion in the tax year 2021, payable in 2022. That represents a 93% increase in 10 years. Don't understand these figures? Hold on a second. When property taxes are high, the burden is simply passed on to tenants. That's why rents are so high. Chicago commercial properties are facing all-time high vacancy rates. Higher property taxes mean higher rents and likely fewer tenants leasing space in the city. For those commercial and residential property owners who absorb the tax costs themselves, they see a reduced return on investment, and this slows growth in the city. Whichever way it goes, it is a lose-lose situation. All these add up to make every other thing expensive in Chicago, as one factor directly or indirectly affects another. Healthcare in Chicago is 13% higher than the national average. Grocery prices are 5% higher than the national average. Housing expenses are 52% higher than the national average. Transportation expenses like bus fares and gas prices are 25% higher than the average. Residents of Chicago are not without surprise, at their breaking point struggling to get by. Here's something interesting. To solve the problem, you'd think the government would look for ways to reduce taxes, right? The government has brighter ideas. Increasing the taxes, that's the big idea. And that's just absurd, because a city struggling with affordability should be looking at ways to reduce burdens on residents, businesses, and job creators rather than seeking new ways to tax them, right? Well, now you know why people are leaving the city, and it isn't just Chicagoans leaving. The city's population loss continued in 2022, with Chicago losing 33,000 residents, accounting for 1/3 of the population loss suffered by the state as a whole. Migrants, too, are leaving Chicago voluntarily. That's insulting in itself. They're saying Chicago isn't the savior it was advertised to be. The cost of living in Chicago is out to kill the living, and they're leaving to save their lives. Despite this, Chicago still battles with a migrant crisis. More than 20,000 migrants have arrived in Chicago since last year, and more than 3,000 are living inside airports and police stations while they await shelter placements. Chicago is struggling to house the growing population of asylum seekers. The massive arrival of migrants has put such a strain on Chicago's social services. We'll see one of the darker sides of Chicago shortly. Now, let's get this right. Due to the strain placed on the city, the government has put new restrictions on the assistance migrants can receive. It has reduced the number of days they can stay in the shelter to 60 days and also reduced the amount of rental assistance they can receive. Yeah, that's the big idea of the government. Help the poor by providing less help. More than 450,000 Chicagoans suffer through poverty every day at a rate of 17.2%. This problem is worse if you live in a minority neighborhood. Residents face poverty of nearly 3 times the citywide average compared to what the whites face. And this brings us to the worst and best neighborhoods in Chicago. For the worst neighborhoods, that's the South Side and West Side. You have places like Fuller Park, Washington Park, West Englewood, East Garfield Park, West Garfield Park, and Inglewood, painting the picture of hopelessness. According to Property Club, these neighborhoods have an overall crime rate of 9,550 on per 1,000 people, making it twice the Chicago average. You have a 1 in 37 chance of becoming a victim of violent crime in West Englewood and a 1 in 15 shot of becoming a victim of a property crime. Burglary, assault, and robbery are common, and residents are not used to being safe here. There's a more disturbing side to the state of these neighborhoods. Regardless, Chicago can be a good place for you if you live in any of these neighborhoods. Irving Park, Lincoln Square, Logan Square, and others. They've got good amenities, and residents can enjoy a variety of parks, community centers, and recreational facilities. Crime rate in these areas is relatively low compared to other areas in Chicago, and most importantly, housing is affordable. Home prices in these areas are well under $200,000. Black neighborhoods suffer in more ways than one in Chicago. For generations, they've suffered government and private sector neglect. The whiff of racial and economic inequality is perceived most strongly here. Various reasons are contributing to increased poverty in these areas. One of these factors is the lack of willingness by financial institutions to reinvest in Black communities, most especially in poor Black communities. The destruction caused in these communities during natural disasters and civil unrest is hardly rebuilt. Now, when there is little or no development happening in a place, it leads to a lack of jobs in these communities. And what happens when there are low jobs available? That's right, crime increases. There exists an underlying cause for this too. From robbery sprees to smash and grabs at stores, Chicago is besieged with crimes happening too often. Residents do not feel safe in their communities. Businesses are disturbed and are closing. All these further inhibit development and leave Chicago worse than it was. Chicago's educational institutions in low-income neighborhoods have lagged behind due to funding, staffing, and other issues. When ranked alongside other cities, public schools in Chicago performed awfully low. The student-to-teacher ratio is abysmally poor. Let's not even get started on the healthcare system here. Seeing how education is closely associated with being able to get better paying jobs, it becomes a struggle for the poor to break out of poverty as a result of being poorly educated. There's a lot of poor in this sentence. Can't help it, as the poor are sadly surrounded by a lot of blockades to prevent them from breaking free. Concerning Chicago's healthcare system, we're presented with an ironic twist. Despite always being among the top in the country and in the world in quality, too many people die of common problems in Chicago. You guessed right. This report comes from the low-income neighborhoods. The structural inequality in Chicago is worrying. The gap between the poor and wealthy is just too wide. According to reports, 900,000 Southside residents have experienced staggering health disparities for decades compared with Northsiders, with a 10 times higher risk of infant mortality and 4 times the rate of death from diabetes. Shortly, we'll see the foundation for all these systemic issues. The South Side has inadequate and deteriorating healthcare facilities, medical services, and infrastructure, including a dangerous shortage of primary care physicians and obstetricians, and many of the residents go outside their communities to get better health care. All these are problems of structural inequality. Chicago is topping the charts this time, and it isn't for most thriving city. Chicago is currently #1 among the top corrupt cities in America. If corruption were an Olympic sport, Chicago would have the gold medal locked down. Every year, dozens of politicians are placed on trial and many are found guilty. Senators, state reps, speakers, and more. Mismanagement of funds by Chicago's politicians has left it with a whopping debt reaching $35 billion and only $10 billion in assets to cover pension funds. That's financial gymnastics that even experts can't comprehend. This financial strain directly impacts essential services like education. The city's public education system is in disarray, failing its students who consistently underperform compared to peers in other cities. Chicago's education situation is way more than just needing cash. Fixing schools isn't just about money, it's about making sure every kid, no matter where they're from, gets a fair shot at a good education. Aldermen are most guilty of crimes related to ward-level building and real estate issues. This makes it so easy for a corrupt council member to insist on bribery to do their jobs. There are more than enough reasons to believe that these council members don't have the interest of the public at heart. Exploitation of their offices makes the public weary of aldermen, and that is it. Chicago's current situation, migrant crisis, unemployment, poor funding, high cost of living, crime rates, high taxes, and corruption is because of major flaws in the system which can be fixed. If people in power can stop messing up resources, facing the problems with practicable solutions, and quit leaving asylum seekers in the lurch, fixing this problem is possible. Let us know your take on the matter.